everyone! In this video I'll be reacting to one of the early uploads from the YouTube channel, the Game Theorists. I hope that you like it because I'm a huge fan of their shows, their videos, yes. Their content is awesome and I hope that you are a huge fan as well. Just go over there and just show support, show love for their channel. And for my channel also, thank you! If you do like this video, please consider like, share and subscribe to my channel. And comment down below if you have anything to share with us. Thank you so much. Subscribe! Please subscribe! Anyways, this video is from back in 2013, so it's around 8 years ago. And then yeah, let's watch the video.
In case you haven't noticed, Earthbound has garnered a fairly strong fan base over the years. I mean, you have Zelda fans, or you have Shenmue fans, but Earthbound fans tend to be pretty devoted. Like, really, really devoted. We're talking about a fan base that organized an internet-wide petition that got over 30,000 unique signatures in less than a year. Mind you, this was in 2002. There are, like, more people on Facebook today than there were people who had internet in 2002. You don't mess with mother fans. Unless you're Nintendo. What is it about this game that makes people fall so madly in love with it? While I won't even pretend to have all the answers, I do have most of them.
Is that Naruto Run? I just noticed. Nejiguma. I win!
Before I dive in, I need to get a couple things out of the way. One, this isn't necessarily a review of the game, it's more of an analysis of certain aspects of it. So I'm not going to summarize the plot, and aside from any in-game footage you see on screen, I'm going to keep significant plot spoilers to an absolute minimum. So no worries for those of you who haven't played the game. You monsters. 2. Moving forward, I ask that you keep in mind that I'm not going to be looking at Earthbound as just any RPG, I'm looking at it as a 90s RPG, on the SNES. Design sensibilities about video game RPGs have changed quite a bit through the decades. If you want a perfect example of this, just take a look at how Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest have changed through the years. RPGs were in a very specific place at this point in time. Okay, let's move on to the actual episode, shall we?
That preface was unnecessary and boring.
One of the aspects of Earthbound that many a player adores is its personality. This game is filled to the brim with personality, which is one of the many reasons why it holds up so darn well even to this day, and it continues to gain new fans, including me. My first time playing through this game front to back was last January, and I'm a cynical smarmy son of a snail, and now look, I'm a fully fledged fuzzy pickler. Don't read too far into that line. Really though, personality is a huge ingredient in what makes this game so phenomenal, in ways that a lot of players don't even notice. This element alone fixes a few design hangups RPGs have. It makes the universe more consistent, which is very important in an RPG, and it actually allows for the writing to be better, more nuanced, and subtle than a lot of other games at the time.
This game's personality is really that important? Dude, I think you're just blowing smoke out of your ass.
Here, let me paint you a picture. You're in an RPG, and you've just arrived at a new town. You've already saved, and you're not sure where to go next. What do? Kill yourself? You talk to every single solitary person in that new town. 9 times out of 10, they just say something really stupid and waste your time. It's like the game was giving you busy work.
Yes, Miss Squaresoft, I turned in my homework. Can I play the fracking game now?
This is one of those hangups that almost every console RPG at the time seemed to have, and most players just gritted their teeth and expected it as part of the package. Earthbound, however, eliminated any need for this tooth-gritting behavior. How? With its
magical personality.
The writing in this game is just bursting with it. It all just has such a quirky and playful sense of humor about it, it almost makes you want to talk to everybody in a new town, just to see what sort of silly stuff will spill out of their mouths. What in some games is mindless busywork becomes one of the core reasons why players enjoy this game, all due to the sheer strength of personality that the writing carries. The reason why the writing in this game is so strong,
Because those NPCs are not just NPCs, they are NPCs with a deeper layer of personality than what seems like on the surface, and that's what makes it so playable, so enjoyable to play.
that it was all carefully handcrafted over 5 years by the game's producer and director, Shigesato Itoi. Itoi is a multi-talented writing ubermensch who became a celebrity in Japan during the 80s, and one way or another ended up spending well over a decade producing, writing, and directing video games with Nintendo over the years. Even Miyamoto himself has gone on record saying that he sometimes takes writing advice from this guy. But we'll get back to this shining paragon of a human being later. The town NPCs aren't the only part of this game that greatly benefited from the quirky writing. The enemies did too. They had ridiculous names and attacks that were thrown in there for the sake of humor. It can really turn what would be hours of mindless battles into funny little stints, like when a crow steals a cookie from your inventory, gorges himself on it, and then becomes far too happy with himself to attack you anymore. 1, that's actually an interesting design idea. 2, that's just ridiculous. Aside from the writing, the music and aesthetics also do a lot to help strengthen this game's sense of personality. A quarter of the space on the game's cartridge was taken up by the music alone, a whopping 8 megabits.
Wow.
For some perspective, there were entire SNES games on store shelves at the time that used less space than this game's music, but those megabits were not ill-spent because the music is great. Even a lot of enemies have their own theme songs, and I'm not just talking bosses. You'll get into fights with insignificant overworld enemies that have their very own motif. It sounds like a tiny detail, but it goes miles towards giving each kind of fight its own flavor independent of the raw mechanics, and it pushes that sense of personality to the forefront. Also, the color palettes that were chosen for each town go a long way towards establishing the tone and feel of each area, and if you couple these beautiful palettes with some absolutely stunning music, you can tell that these places weren't just slapped together in an afternoon. These elements were carefully handcrafted and pulled freshly out of the oven just like Grandma used to make. Sure, other RPGs at the time did things just like this, and it helped to give them their own style and personality too. The thing about Earthbound is that all these disparate elements were unified and defined by the personality. It's an ever-pervasive element that almost mystically glues everything in the game together in a way that makes sense within the game's universe. It's just amazing good anomatastifulbulous. Yeah.
Is that a word? Is that a legit word?
That's a good word. Great job, Robbie. Thanks. Most SNES RPGs in the 90s took their plot very seriously. Almost too seriously at times. Sure, they might have silly moments every once in a while to lighten the tense tone, but the overall mood of the game would be all business. Meow. Earthbound, as I've illustrated in bright fluorescent ink, is the polar opposite. In fact, it's almost a satire of what other RPGs were doing at the time. Seriously, this stuff is like high art. Well, maybe not so much. But it is just so loony and nutty and absurd. It's not afraid to get meta or hang lampshades, and it's so much better for it. This game is in on the joke. So much so that you kind of begin to fall in love with it and embrace it. It's lovely colors, it's cute buildings, it's funny dialogue, and then, in the midst of all the silliness, it will hit you upside the face with a heaping dose of serious. You will cringe, you will cry, and you will never know when to expect it. Believe it or not, this game goes to dark places and raises uncomfortable questions. But the scariest part is, the game never lingers on it. It will yank you down a dark road for all of 20 seconds and then go right back into happy zany fun land. Yay! Even though the game moves on, you'll sometimes find yourself stuck, mulling over a small sentence that some NPC said. And this game can be really, really subtle about it. That's just good craftsmanship. You have games today that are struggling with gaining a player's empathy. Earthbound almost effortlessly takes that empathy and plays tiddlywinks with it. And that's another thing actually. It's incredibly easy to relate with the characters in Earthbound. Most hardships or struggles that arose in the narrative of other RPGs at the time were very relevant to the in-game characters, but not so much to the player holding the controller.
What?
What I mean is, it's hard to personally feel sorry for Kane Highwind when he gets poisoned or petrified in battle. I mean, if you think about it, that would totally suck, to get poisoned or petrified in real life, but most fans of Final Fantasy probably don't think about status effects in that way, because the games don't really expect you to. But when Ness is trying to find his way out of a dark cave and starts feeling homesick, because he wants nothing more in the world right now than to hear his mother's voice over the phone because he really, really misses her, I mean, that's something that a player can empathize with. Ness is a 2D sprite afflicted with an annoying status effect, and yet, somehow, as a player, this game got me to empathize with it. I mean, Ness is just a kid after all, a tired kid in a really, really dark cave. As an aside, there's also a lot of subtext thrown in here and there. This game unabashedly draws lines all over the place and simply allows the player to read in between them. If you've played this game and you don't know what I'm talking about, you might not have looked closely enough. Even through the translation, Itoi's writing is just phenomenal. Oh, Itoi, I still have to get to him, don't I? Well, Itoi wasn't the only member on the staff that worked on this game. Earthbound is very much his creation.
Really?
He personally wrote all the text, which, considering this is an RPG, that's a huge chunk of this game's genetic makeup. However, that's not the only role he played in this game's creation. Judging by all the interviews I read, a lot of the aesthetic choices and important design decisions were actually made by him. And believe it or not, even as far back as the mid-90s, it honestly seems like he had a very good grasp of game design as a creator.
If we're still talking about games in the context of what we know as games, so I think we need to take a closer look at it. In America, the Famicom is called Nintendo Entertainment System, right? It doesn't say a word about games. I like to apply that knowledge, that logic.
Better than a lot of developers do today, it's kind of scary. And Earthbound, as a game, does play around with what games are capable of doing, and it has a lot of cool narrative ideas here and there. In some ways, it almost feels ahead of its time. Development on this game took a total of 5 years, which is pretty lengthy even by today's standards. And Itoi said several times that things got pretty rocky during those years. He even mentioned that he'd sometimes spend nights at the office sleeping on 3 lined-up chairs. That's extreme. just when things were looking their darkest. President of Howland, programming whiz Satoru Iwata took the reins and saved the game's development. Later he became president of Nintendo and finally rose to power in 2018 as supreme ruler of the everything. Or not. While there is a whole bunch more I can and want to say about
I'm gonna spoil it for you, Ronnie, but you know what? Let's not do it.
This game, from its fantastic enemy encounter system to the mechanics of its health bars to its downright diabolical copyright protection, I think I might save all that for another video. Earthbound is a groundbreaking game, and while sometimes its 90s does begin to peak out here and there, it almost makes the game that much more endearing. This game tells a great story that will warm your heart and tug at its strings. Just play it if you haven't, and if you've already played it, just play it again. Come on, you know you love it. Hey guys, Ronnie Edwards here.
I hope you get dismembered by bottlenose dolphins.
Don't say that. It's very discouraging. It's very mean.
So MatPat did an Earthbound video of his own back in the day. It talks about cultists, police brutality, and a little bit of the old in out. You should totally check it out. Also, Earthbound is a very interesting game with a very interesting history, and I've only just scraped the surface. If you want a more complete history or a thorough review, check both of these fantastic videos out by Rue and the HVGN. Really, these guys are great. You might notice some overlap here and there between some of the points all our videos cover, but that's just bound to happen when you're talking about the same game.
You steal men's ideas and call them your own. YouTube ill needs a theorist such as you.
Do you have problems?
Come on. Don't be mean to each other. Show respect to each other. Just say friendly words. But honestly speaking, I think that Ronnie's video is very entertaining and yeah, just very nice to watch. Thank you so much, Ronnie. Thank you.